One of the assignments that a number of the rising 9th into 10th graders had difficulty with were the summer reading annotations. So this is a quick little how-to guide for students going into 10th grade English at York High School. The two novels that you are reading are The Stranger by Albert Camus and Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. For each novel, you are going to be doing an analysis of 20 different quotations. We call this analysis an annotation. Essentially, you're picking a quotation, a small snippet of text, and explaining something about that particular piece of text. So, if you're looking for the actual chart and information, it's available online, and if you follow this link, you can get the full packet of summer reading as mandated by the school board office. So as you're doing your annotations, there are a number of different types of annotations that you can do. One of them might be asking a question, right? And so it tells you that questioning, right, raises a thoughtful question that pushes past plot events, such as wondering what will happen or how the novel will end. And it also stipulates that once you raise a question, you have to then answer it, right? The answer should think about the larger purpose of the text. What that means is the theme. So one of the problems that I had is that people said, I wonder why his name is Okonkwo. That's simply his name. That has no relevance to the theme of the novel, right? So if you're asking a question, you might think of something that's related to the theme or the ideas within the text. But once you ask a question, you then have to consider the answer to that question. It's not enough just to pose a simple question. The big ones are determining importance and interpreting language. So when you determine importance, you're trying to figure out how that little piece of text links to the overall theme of the work. And the theme, again, is the message. So how does that little piece indicate something important about the text as a whole? Interpreting language does the same thing. You're looking at the language, what is used, and explaining why the author chose to phrase it that way. If they use similes or metaphors, what those particular similes or metaphors are conveying and why it's important. Making connections means that you're making connections between the text and other things that you have read. So again, maybe it's another form of mythology or a novel or a poem or a short story. And again, when you make that connection, you should think about thematically, how are they the same? Right? How are these two texts kind of similar in the points that they raise? Make sure that you do not rely too heavily on any of those strategies, particularly the questioning, because it's the most difficult for people to actually make good commentary, making good points about the text itself. So the first novel that you have to read is The Stranger. And before you start to review any kinds of outside sources, just a quick introduction to the novel is that it delves into philosophy. The main character, whose name is Meursault, is an existentialist. Existentialists believe that there is no kind of meaning or purpose to life. They simply exist just to exist. So for us, most of us have a meaning or a purpose for which we live. And it's very difficult for us to understand a character who doesn't make any sense to us. He doesn't abide by or live by the same kind of values that we do. And so one of the things that The Stranger looks at is how people who have very differing points of view are treated. And ultimately, when we have people whose beliefs are very different from ours, it causes conflict. So that's one of the things that the novel examines. As you look at Meursault, he's a very different kind of character from some of the ones that you've seen before. People describe him as indifferent and apathetic, and that's true in some ways because, again, he doesn't react in the same way that many of us do. But beyond that, the novel asks you to evaluate your own morals, your own values, and your own perceptions, and to see how oftentimes we're biased in favor of those things that we do believe. So one of the things that's important to look at in the novel is that the idea of society is predicated on certain conventions. Conventions are expectations. So again, if you go into a restaurant, there are certain conventions. Like in Western culture, you're going to use silverware. And again, these are not things that we're born with. They're things that we learn. And so part of the novel asks us to look at the idea that within society, lots of individuals have different perceptions and opinions about what is normal or what is socially acceptable, right? And so Meursault and his character are in the novel to purposely allow us to question those things that we believe or we know, right? So as you read the text and you make your commentary, think about this kind of theme. Where do we see Meursault being judged for being different? Where do we see him not understanding other people and their values or their perceptions, right? So as you read the text, look for examples of things that would pertain to that theme, right? The idea that expectations and social conventions are very difficult for people with differing beliefs. So look at those things as you're going through the novel. Make commentary on those quotes that you think expresses that. Each one of the characters in the novel lives for a different thing. What is each character's purpose, and how do you see that? Right? And again, Meursault doesn't understand that all the time, but what are these different purposes for which people live? So annotations show how the text make meaning. You're explaining how a quotation relates to the theme or shows something significant. So one of the things that I got a lot of annotations about were just people making random observations. So in Things Fall Apart, someone said, boom, boom goes the drum. The drums make noise. This is not really important in the text. It's not showing me that you're thinking about the theme or thinking about like the important points in the novel. So this is what annotations do, right? Generally, they situate the passage, what's going on. They think about the purpose or the theme of this particular passage, if it uses any literary techniques, and then you link it back to the novel as a whole, right? What is the author trying to communicate? So you're picking apart piece by piece the text and explaining what the author conveys. So little quote snippets are usually helpful in your paragraph. So here's an example, and say you come across this particular paragraph in your novel. One bright, blisteringly hot and humid day in early July, John drove his car to Wawa. He loved that car. He loved it like he loved his mama. He loved it more than the girl he called his girlfriend. Aphrodite was a blood-red Ford Mustang, and he would do anything for her. So as we're looking at this particular passage, there's a couple of different things that we get out of it. Remember, everything is a choice. The author chooses these things, right? The car's name is Aphrodite. Why? Again, Aphrodite is the goddess of love. It shows how much he really loves this car, right? The whole theme of the passage is the passion that he has for this car. So again, why set it in July, in a time where it's hot and humid? That heat is supposed to represent that passion, right? And again, it repeats, he loved that car, he loved it, he loved it. And again, just to emphasize how much he loves this particular car, right? So again, there's a number of similes. He loved it like he loved his mama. All of those things convey his overwhelming love for the car. That's all that commentary is. You pick out a passage and explain how it relates to the theme. So here's an example, and just those things that we pulled out. So in the passage, a man's overwhelming love for the car is described. It uses metaphors and imagery and similes to show how much the vehicle means, right? So again, there's imagery in words like bright, blisteringly hot, and humid, right? Heat is a metaphor for the car. He loved it like he loved his mama. And again, the simile shows how much he loves the Mustang. It could be exaggeration, but again, it suggests great passion. Throughout the passage, the conceit of the car, it's an extended metaphor, and the woman is created. So the car is called Aphrodite, the goddess of love, to show that deep and abiding passion for the car. And that's all commentary is picking apart the quote and thinking, how is this relative? How is this relevant to the entirety of the novel? How does this show an important piece of the novel? Think of it as teaching it to a friend, if you will. So you'll pull out a character and explain something about this particular quote and then what it conveys about the novel as a whole. So here's a sample, right, that uses a literary techniques focus. And this piece is from The Stranger. So as they're judging him, right, the prosecutor says this man has no place in a community whose basic principles he flouts with no compunction. I am following not only the dictates of my conscience and sacred obligation, but also those of the natural and righteous indignation I feel at the sight of a criminal devoid of the least spark of human feeling. Now, if you remember, one of the things that I told you about The Stranger is how people immediately judge others when they do not follow the same values as they. So again, they say that he has no place. He's an outsider or a stranger, right? The idea that he flouts these principles, right? To flout is to recklessly disregard, right? So the prosecutor represents law and order. And again, he is persecuting Meursault because he believes very strongly in his religious dictates, right? He describes Meursault as a criminal devoid of human feeling. So again, we see him judging Meursault because Meursault doesn't believe in the same things as he does, right? So as you're going through, you're trying to explain how this particular character shows the theme, right? So again, he's very critical, and the audience is supposed to think about this and wonder, is Meursault really a criminal devoid of human feeling? And the answer, of course, is no. He's not devoid of human feeling. He's just very different. His feelings and emotions are different than the average individual. So that's an example of commentary. How does this show an important facet of the novel? And how does it relate to the theme? Right? So again, here's an example. Mama died today or yesterday maybe. I don't know. And again, Meursault is a very different kind of person. Right? He doesn't necessarily care about the same things as most. And so the opening lines are very short, which shows that he is kind of indifferent to many things that people care about. Well, why is that important? Because again, later in the novel, people are going to judge him for this lack of emotion. It's going to cause difficulties, and of course, ultimately, it's going to cause conflict in the novel. So it's kind of foreshadowing here. Right? So again, there's other different pieces. At one point, they're going to a funeral, and it says that one of the characters is walking with great dignity without a single wasted motion. And so again, he watches this man at the funeral, and it's in Algeria, which is in the desert. It's hot, right? And he's wearing all black, and he's walking in this funeral procession. And again, Meursault finds it a little odd that they're doing this. The reader understands, though, that this is part of what society expects. But Meursault, as somebody who doesn't necessarily believe in those social conventions, has difficulty in understanding why people do the things that they do. And so in this, we see the difference between Meursault's point of view and the point of view of most other people, which is why Meursault is estranged, or the stranger, from society. So as you go through the text, Meursault interacts with lots of people who have various kind of meanings in society, right? What are some of the things that these people are interested in that many of us would value? And it's one of the reasons that we see Meursault as so different, because he doesn't value those same things that we do, right? So look at the different times that people judge Meursault, right? Make a note of some of Meursault's reactions, things that, again, he reacts to that are different from other people. Think about those kinds of things as you're doing your annotations, and it'll be a little bit easier to understand. The novel Things Fall Apart is about something very similar to The Stranger. Both novels are warning against judging or condemning other people. So Things Fall Apart is about ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is seeing your culture as superior. So you see the way that you do things as the best. And again, we are oftentimes ethnocentric when we think about other cultures. We believe that our way of doing things or our beliefs are correct, and everybody else is primitive or silly for the things that they believe. So again, as you're going through the text, see if you can find moments where we see this conflict of cultures, right? You can also think about how different things show the theme of the text. So again, there's a scene where locusts come in, and at first they seem like a blessing, and then they destroy everything in their wake. So again, you could compare that to the arrival of people who will later destroy a culture, right? So anytime you have a quote, see if you can link it to the theme or the point of the text. What is this particular thing illustrating? Think about how it illustrates a conflict. Think about how it illustrates a character trait. Think about the lesson that comes from these various points throughout the text. So as you're going through, anything can be an annotation, as long as you can find a way to link it to the point of the novel, right? So again, if you find something interesting, you can definitely comment on it, but think about how this relates to the big picture, the author's message or the author's point. Always include that part in there with what you do. So as you go through the different kinds of pieces in the text, right, think about the main character. He definitely has a number of flaws, right? And that's certain of any kind of hero in any novel, right? What are some of those different kinds of flaws that he has? And what is it that the author shows through some of these flaws? There are other characters as well throughout the novel that have various kinds of flaws. Many people, not just the Africans, not just the Europeans, many people are ethnocentric. They see their ways as best. Where do you see examples of these kinds of things happening, right? What important points or symbols or characters do you see that illustrate a point about a particular culture? Or what particular conflicts do you see? And on what side does the author fall? How does he support these things? So again, as you go through, make note of things like symbols or important events that you see and how they communicate a theme. Always link it back to the theme. So just to wrap up, annotations are your commentary, right? Your explanation of a quote and how it links to a bigger point or theme. Your annotations should be about 3 or 4 sentences each. As you talk about literature, do it in present tense. So Achebe writes and Okonkwo says, Meursault goes. So again, write about it in present tense. Try to avoid personal pronouns like I, me, my, we, you, us, our, anything that refers to you, right, as a person. So try to leave out the I, the me, and the you. And as you're writing, try to write formally, which means that you write out contractions. So instead of saying can't, you write cannot. So when you do these, you will do well if you, again, find a way to pull out the meaning of these quotes and link it to the bigger picture, link it to the theme. How does this particular character illustrate a point? How does this particular action illustrate the author's theme or point? What does he want you to consider? Hopefully this helps you, and if you have any questions, there are various contact sites on the summer reading piece that will help you. Good luck and happy reading.